Thank you, Teresa. All right, well, we're going to be nice and cozy up here, so I'll welcome my panelists. I think there's going to be 5 of us in total. And we're going to be talking about film and the power of film in food advocacy. So come on up, guys. We'll need 2 more chairs up here, please. I'll scooch these down.
Yep. Do you want one?
No, here. Good thing we all know each other, right?
That's right.
Great. Well, I would like to welcome to this stage. We have here Dana Vettel, who is the lead strategic communications partnerships at International Fund for Agricultural Development, or IFAD, UN agency, for those of you who are not familiar. We also have Oliver English, who is the co-founder and CEO of Common Table Creative, and also the filmmaker that we screened his film this morning, for those of you who are able to enjoy that. Feeding Tomorrow. We also have Sara Farley, who is the Vice President for the Global Food Portfolio at the Rockefeller Foundation, and Matt Wilson, who's the Food Sovereignty Director for the Sicangu Community Development Cooperation, which serves the Lakota people on the Rosebud Reservation. So thank you all for being here. Sara, I want to start with you. So I got the opportunity to see Food 2050 at COP last year in Sharm, which is a film that Rockefeller Foundation helped fund. I think it's the first time you guys gotten into the film business as a foundation. I believe you screened it yesterday here in Austin as well, so some of you maybe got an opportunity to see that film. So I'd love to hear from you. Why film? Why Rockefeller kind of dip your toes into this new way of engaging with audiences?
Yes, well, I wish we could have shown it here for all of you and anyone online, but it's, the reason why is because we are a world really starved of hope right now when it comes to solving the intersectional poly crisis that we're confronting that touches not just upon food, but conflict, security, energy, finance, etc. And as Roy Steiner, who leads our food initiative at the Rockefeller Foundation, often quotes, "Without hope, the people perish." And as a longtime advocate and lover of sci-fi, one can just look at sort of the books and movies, the portrayals of the future, and they are bleak. And we eat it up, right? Whether it's Handmaid's Tale or Black Mirror, we really have become quite adept at creating depictions of futures that we absolutely hope never befall us. And you really have to think creatively to think of a single book or movie set in the future that isn't dystopian. It's what we create. So with that as an observation, it really sparked this idea of what if you could create an opportunity, a prize for anyone, anywhere, to author, not just as an individual, but as a community, a picture for the year 2050 that is feasible, transformational, inspirational, and really rooted in place. So Matt was among one of more than 1,300 teams, 4,000 organizations from 119 countries that came forward with an idea, and a very, very nuanced idea. This sort of speaks to technology, policy, culture, diet, economics, environment. And so the why here was really both about agency and empowerment, really to say and make clear that anyone, anywhere can be protagonists in their own future, and to honestly start to crowdsource the blueprints, because I think, frankly speaking, we don't have blueprints, and there will never be a blueprint for the future. What is true for Sicangu and the Rosebud Reservation is quite unique to what it would be in Madagascar or in the somewhere in the Sahel. So the why here: agency, hope, and a feasible and inspiring alternative to dystopia.
Matt, so what was experience like for you, and how important is it for you to be able to tell the own stories of your people in this way?
Sorry. Yeah, I think for me in the beginning, I was really skeptical at first. I think a lot of Indigenous stories have always focusing on like the challenges of those, of our people. and never much on hope. And also, I think that the stories themselves are never told by indigenous peoples. And so I was skeptical at first going into it, but I was really excited to work with Media Red, our film team. They did an amazing job and allowed our story to be one of hope. And so I think we only had 3 days to get all the filming done, and it was during the pandemic, so it was a little bit hectic getting things done. But overall, it was a really amazing experience, and it allowed our team on Rosebud to be more organized and really embrace storytelling as part of the work. And even to this day, our marketing department has really been working with our internal team and making sure that storytelling is is part of every day of all the work that we're doing every day, and a skill that all of our employees and our interns and our volunteers are going to learn.
And Oliver, continuing on this theme of hope, I love this and thinking about the tone. You talked a little bit earlier today about your journey to becoming a filmmaker. For those who weren't part of those conversations, can you give us a little bit about how you went from working in the restaurant industry to creating your first film and why?
Sure. Does this work? Yep. Oh, hey now. All right, good. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that what you guys said so far is absolutely so spot on. And it is part of this greater realization that I had through the lens of the restaurant business initially. I grew up deeply involved in the restaurant business. Literally, my parents met at cooking school, and they opened restaurants together. And I grew up from a very young age on the banquettes, always involved in the restaurant business. And so, thought that I was someone who was very connected to food, or one would assume was, very connected, knowledgeable about food. And it wasn't until 6 years ago that I realized that I had never asked the question, where does food come from? I was opening a restaurant in the Middle East, and I ordered a bunch of food, and I was kind of looking at it one day after training the staff. I had opened the restaurant, and I realized there's 12 ingredients from 8 countries. And I asked the chef to come out, and I said, when do you think this was harvested? And he said, well, this tomato was from Spain, this head of lettuce was from here, this beef was from Australia, this maybe was harvested 3-4 weeks ago, put on this container, this boat, this thing. And I'm sitting and looking at all of this, and I'm not great with math, but I had doing general calculations and was like, this is insane. And if someone like me could have worked their entire life in the restaurant business, studied hospitality in school, had parents who are chefs, been in the business and never asked that question, where does food come from? Maybe that was representative of a broader disconnection that exists in our society. And not that it's anyone's fault necessarily, but it is a reflection of how disconnected we have become to nature, to food, to consumption more broadly. And it was that realization, that moment of, honestly, kind of embarrassment and that bewilderment that I had never asked those questions, that led me to seek out a local farmer the next time I was opening a restaurant in the Bahamas, where I was kind of doing our next restaurant project. And I ended up meeting this farmer named Sicangu who radically transformed the trajectory of my life and is the reason that I am sitting with you here today. He had a love and a passion and warmth for food and soil and a way of explaining things that I just found so inspiring. And I said, Sicangu, how do we get people to change the way that they're doing things? And he said, man, you cannot point a finger and tell people that they've been bad for the way they've been doing things. You've got to say, hey man, come on, take a walk with me. Let's see what we discover. And after meeting him, I was convinced that everyone needed to meet a farmer. And farmers were this powerful vehicle for connection and communication. And if through the lens of the restaurant business, I could help to bring more stories of farmers to the world, we could connect people back to food and to issues of environmental sustainability. And so it was really that first meeting with Sicangu that began my whole journey. And since that interaction, we've created this film. My production company, Common Table Creative, also works with food companies, NGOs, and nonprofits all over the world to tell stories about food and farming. We visited 60-plus farms all over the world, Germany, India, Central America, all throughout the United States, and interviewed dozens and dozens of farmers. And I am more inspired by the day, learning from these incredibly inspiring people. And if we can, as storytellers, introduce somebody to a farmer who is a powerful communicator about these issues, that can have a really big impact.
I love how we had a lot of conversations about getting excited about soil. I don't know if anyone ever thought we could We were talking about bringing soil back. Dana, I'd love to bring you in. And actually, I know we do have an example of some film. As IFAD, as a UN agency, has been doing more in putting together film as a medium for storytelling for the work that you do and the urgency of the work that you do. So maybe we can have that teed up to play here, and then I'll tee up a question for you about that.
Everyone in the world has gone to bed one night or another with fear or pain or loss. And yet each of us has awakened, arisen, somehow made our ablution, seen other human beings, and said, "Morning, how are you?"
Good morning. Hola.
You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me in the very dirt, but still like dust. I'll rise. Did you want to see me broken? Bowed head and lowered eyes. Shoulders falling down like teardrops, weakened by my soulful cries. Does my sassiness upset you? Don't take it so hard just because I laugh. As if I have gold mines digging in my own backyard. You can shoot me with your words. You can cut me with your lies. You can kill me with your hatefulness. But just like life, I rise. Up from a past rooted in pain, I rise. A black ocean leaping and wide, welling and swelling, I bear in the tide. I rise. We rise.
And of course, you see lots of smiling and laughing. I think our sector has long been rightfully criticized for the maybe overuse of poverty porn, right? And showing destitution in a way that really loses the humanity of the people that we're trying to work with. How did you think about that and the tone in putting together your video? And how do you think about that as a communication tool for the importance of your work?
Thanks, Kate, for the great question. Can you guys hear me? Okay, great. I really appreciate this question. The International Fund for Agricultural Development is a specialized United Nations agency and an international financial institution, which means what we do is really simple. It's financial lending, it's data, it is working with country governments to design programs. And so the nature of the work we do is that it is inherently complex. And so I think the challenge, but the opportunity that film presents is to bridge that and to show the solution in a show not tell kind of way. What I love about the video is that you get a sense of our mission without anyone saying a word. You are on a journey with those women and feeling something at the end of the video, which I think is really powerful. Everyone up here today has talked about the power of solutions, but what does that mean when you look at it? I think for me, as somebody who works in communications and partnerships, it's taking something like a short film and then reaching new audiences, and that can be really challenging. But what is hopeful about it to me is that you can solve hunger by solving poverty. These go hand in hand. That's part of the story that we're telling. And so, again, and I think the opportunity to show the film here, which thank you so much, it's very short, but it also complements and mirrors the efforts, I think, of everyone on this stage, which is we're trying to reach new audiences, and we're utilizing film as a vehicle to do that.
So we actually all were at COP last year. I think some of us even met there. It's a little bit of a COP reunion. Climate is so critical to impacts food impacts climate. That's part of one of the big conversations happening at South by Southwest this week. I know Rockefeller Foundation, you're making climate really core to all of the work that you're doing. But Matt, I'd love for you to contextualize that and talk about how is climate impacting your people, and what are some of the messages you hope to get across to the audience through your participation in the film?
Yeah, I think some of the things we're experiencing right now, just like in California, they're getting a lot of rain. In South Dakota, we're getting a lot of snow. This past December, we had about 3 foot of snow in just one storm. And for us, we didn't have time to prepare. A lot of people rely on propane. And then following a few days after that, we had like really extreme bitter coldness, and it was like -30 and -45 with the wind chill. We actually did lose some people in our community because of the cold. So we're experiencing that for our winters right now. And in the summer, it's kind of the opposite. We don't get enough rain. And so we're getting the drought, and we are getting the kind of like the Dust Bowl effect. I think a lot of farmers in South Dakota are using, conventional ag, and a lot of, the prairies are just kind of battered with wind. And so we are getting that Dust Bowl effect, and it's really affecting, the soil. And I think something that we're trying to do on Rosewood is really trying to rebuild that soil health and rebuild that connection with the land. And that's what we're doing now with our farmers that we're working with now, and trying to build the next generation of farmers that are really going to be leaders in what people are calling regenerative agriculture, but what I like to call indigenous agriculture. And so giving them the tools that they can grow their own food and keep their families healthy and sustainable.
And Sara, you're bringing in the farmers that you met and worked with on the film, and just the work you do at Rockefeller Foundation. Obviously, climate is a big part of what you're doing in Russia. I mean, commitment to really making that central to everything Rockefeller gets involved in. What did you hear from the people that you featured and worked with in your film about climate that you really wanted to be able to get across through that film?
Well, I think the first is that we need the tools, the mindset, the policy, and the funding to build resilience for farmers. We asked them, many decades ago to come on one journey, a journey optimizing for productivity and efficiency, and the rules of the game have changed. We do not any longer have time strictly to optimize for yield. We need to feed a much larger global population, which means both curbing food loss and waste, halting deforestation and land conversion, but also addressing the fact that the #1 cause of death, preventable death globally, is what we eat. It is diet-related disease, or processed diet-related disease, as I heard this weekend. So, what we're hearing from farmers is, help us go on this journey. The system of incentives is, one, not fully meeting farmers, which is why we're seeing the average age of farmers globally increase. And you heard Manoj Kumar, one of the leaders of a fabulous visionary team in the Nandi Foundation in India, say, if there's one thing Indian parents agree on, it's please, my daughter, my son, do not become farmers, because the prospects for well-being seem so minimized, and that's just not fair. We can't be asking farmers to do so much more and have them contemplate that doing that might mean losing their house, losing their land, not having the ability to send their children to school. So what that means as funders, as policymakers, as consumers, we do need to make it the easier choice, both in terms of making investments, voting, putting food on the shelves, that the easier choice is food that is regeneratively produced, that is nourishing for our bodies, and that supports meaningful living wages for farmers and well-being for communities. And that's really what I think farmers want. Farmers use different language for this. As Matt said, some call it indigenous agriculture, indigenous foodways. Others call it regenerative. Others call it agroecological or climate smart. The vocabulary is different, and we need to be thoughtful about that. But the underpinning about doing right by people, by nature, and by climate, farmers want that, and we need to be responsive.
Yeah, I love that point about the vocabulary, and being with the UN agency. UN agencies are not alone in this, but there's a lot of terminology and acronyms and technology. Would you think about communicating the importance of your work and the kind of work you're doing, and particularly you're working with a wide range of stakeholders, probably from farmers to government ministries. How do you think about that importance of language and bringing multiple stakeholders together and how you communicate your work?
Thank you for the great question. I think that language and in communications, this is so important. And you will hear communication described as soft skills, but imagine how hard your advocacy world is without it. It is really difficult sometimes to explain how much goes into thinking about how we translate really complex concepts into language that's accessible. Because, and this is, to me, it kind of gets into the aid development paradox, which is aid is something you can see. And it's something that's immediate, and it is so important. And we live in a world where I think this is always going to be part of the solution. However, we don't need a Band-Aid approach to that solution. We need development. But development is much more complex. It involves a lot of stakeholders. It involves governments. It involves private sector. It involves multilateralism, UN agencies, nonprofits. It involves the entertainment industry now. And so I think when you bring all of those people together, they can be part of the solution, but it is much more complex, and you need language that is accessible. You need language that transcends all of those different spheres. And I think that is part of the challenge for me as someone who's in communication partnerships, but as part of the opportunity is when you get like-minded people, like creative people on this stage together, we do come up with those solutions. And I think it's really powerful because we say, I think it's an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. I think that's really important because we can see the results, but it might take more time. And I recommend taking a break from doomsday scrolling on Twitter and looking at some of these solutions. You might not see them immediately, but they are there.
And Oliver, how do you see film fitting into a broader landscape of advocacy and trying to mobilize and motivate what is a very complex system to fix with many different stakeholders? How do you view the role of film as part of that?
It's a fantastic question. How much time do we have? I think one of the lessons that I learned early on in the restaurant business, and this is not my quote, but you may have heard it, and it is, people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will not forget how you made them feel. And this is the kind of situation of, a waiter brought you the wrong thing, but at the end of the day, they had a smile on their face and they served you with love and care. That's what you're going to remember. And I think film has the power to do that. And you might not remember all the statistics that you hear, you probably won't. You might not remember all the facts here and there, but film has the unique capacity to make you feel something and make you realize that we are all in this together and that we all have a common purpose and prosperity to work for. And I think when we talk about, Sara mentioned this earlier, so many of these challenges that we've been looking at and are experiencing, whether it's related to climate, health, inequality, lack of food access, have all been looked at in silos in many ways for the past couple decades. And the food system is probably, or is, the most powerful interconnected vehicle we have to talk about interconnected, harmonious solutions. And to show people, to tell people, to inspire people to feel the connection between these issues, and to show them that if we are able to address our food system, we are able to have an interconnected impact on the biggest health, inequality, and environmental epidemics of our time. And film also has the capacity to inspire hope. And that's been said a couple times, but that is not insignificant. That is very real, and it allows people to see themselves as part of the solution. One thing we were thinking about when we were creating our film was we talk about a bunch of different issues that are very much connected, but the feedback we get is that all people come away with different favorite parts. Some people want to learn more about composting. Some people want to eat more plants. Some people want to fix the farm bill. That's great. We want to encourage all of that. We want everyone to pick a little piece of it because that'll lead to something else. The person that wants to plant some food and flowers is more likely to go to the farmer's market. That person is more likely to then raise their voice up at a local school board meeting. That person is more likely to say something at the grocery store and then to tell their neighbors why they're going to the farmer's market. So the food system and film allows us to see ourselves in the solution and tell our friends about it. And I think that's the power of film and the power of food and the intersection right there.
And Sara, I'm going to presume you maybe didn't have filmmaker in your career bingo card, huh? I'd love to hear what was, most surprising about the process. What did you learn? If there are others who are thinking about dipping their toes in this medium, what would you share as advice?
Well, first advice, talk to a professional, not me. So that would be a piece of talk, call Oliver. Oh my goodness. I mean, one, I think I have such a deep appreciation for how many stories you can tell with raw footage. We probably went through 30 versions of the film, plus or minus. We had 300 hours of footage. We actually began thinking we were going to make shorts. So we have, and you can find them on our website, we have a short 6 minutes just on Sicangu and the 7-gen vision, one just on Dali and Beijing, Mama's Kitchen in Nairobi. So we started there, but as our filmmaker team, Media Red, observed, there's such a rich story when you can bring it all together. And what was fascinating, as we got feedback as well from different people in the food system in very different contexts, with small edits, the entirety of a film looks entirely different. And the through line really takes you to a different set of sort of observations and conclusions of the observer. So one, I think I now see films, I'm like, wow, this is version one of an infinite set of storylines that could have been told with the hours. And that just gave me profound reverence for filmmakers, because they really are weavers. And in that way, it takes me to traditions, indigenous traditions of storytelling and the imperative of oral tradition and passing stories, and the reality that through each storyteller, there's a fingerprint on the story that makes it ever so unique. So yeah, it's a wild process, and just being a fly on the wall, I tip my hat to filmmakers.
And Matt, you probably didn't expect that you would be a film star. Is that what we can call you?
Yeah, not at all. I actually
Signing
didn't
autographs after this.
Yeah, exactly.
So how was that experience in thinking about, and how are you now able to leverage that experience in some of the work that you're doing with your communities?
Yeah, I think some of the things we're thinking about now is how do we build off this work, and how do we have our community tell their own stories of what's going on and what they're experiencing. And so recently we just did a workshop with our 7-gen youth interns this past summer. It's a group of 10 students who are looking to be the next change makers. And part of that work was really telling your story, and not only sharing the highlights of your life, but also the lowlights, the parts that we might not be proud of. Being able to take, some of those parts that we don't like to share, and turning that into, motivation and inspire others through that. So we got to do that, and we worked with them to tell their story, and it was so emotional. I think a lot of people got hope out of it as well. So I just see the power that storytelling has, and we're just hoping to do more of that with this work.
And Dana, what are kind of the key messages you're looking to get across as an agency when you think about creating film and different communications tools?
Thanks for that. This will actually mirror, I think, what Matt was talking about, which is rural voices. So I mentioned stakeholders, I mentioned data, I mentioned there's so many elements, and there's so many ways you could go about it. But I think putting rural voices at the heart of the narrative is what's really important. You don't need to hear from me. What I want to do is to be that bridge to connect and to a platform so that you can hear from these rural voices themselves. I can sit here and say $1 invested in resilience will save at least $10 in emergency aid over time. But that is much more powerful if you see the impacts of resilience. If you hear from someone who was facing devastating effects of climate change on the heels of a cholera outbreak in their community, on the heels of COVID, but they were able to be resilient to those. It doesn't mean they didn't experience hardships, but that they're inspiring others through that ability to get through it. That's what we're all trying to do. So for me, it's really looking at all of the technical, all the technical details and data, and getting out of my own way, and presenting a platform where you can hear from these voices directly. And that's something that is really important to EFAD, and it's I think, central to the work that we're doing.
And Oliver, what are the key messages that you hope people take away from your film, and what is it that you're trying to drive, change, or achieve with the filmmaking that you're doing?
Absolutely. I think there's been a lot of great filmmaking and advocacy around the need to transform our food system over the past couple years. I think we are at the precipice of a tipping point, and we need to move quickly to accelerate the amount of systemic awareness and the amount of change. We hope to instill a couple things. The farmer Mark Shepard in our film says it quite well. It's the power of one. I talked a little bit about this earlier, but we need change from the bottom up, which is cultural, systemic change in the form of our individual behavior, in the form of restaurants and supermarkets working on zero waste, supporting local and organic farmers. People eating more plants doesn't mean everyone has to be vegan. We know we need some animals as part of holistic, regenerative, indigenous farming systems. We need top-down support via federal farm bill subsidies. We need people to realize and see themselves as part of a more sustainable future. And I think one thing that I've learned throughout creating this film is that food is perhaps the most powerful vehicle we have to show people that we can have a positive impact on the world around us. Once we ingest something from the earth, you know, there's two different tomatoes, and each one of these tomatoes can have a very different impact on the world around us, on the carbon, on environmental destruction, on human health. And once we realize that by ingesting tomato B versus tomato A, we can have a net positive impact on the world around us, we start to see ourselves as part of the solution. So often, I think the environmental movement is about how do we do less bad, which is true. But instead of operating from a place of helplessness, let's operate from a place of positive, integrated, intersectional action that is delicious and fun. And we can gather around the table with our friends and our family at holidays, at school, in our faith communities, wherever it is that we gather. But we can support local farmers, we can support the systems of agriculture that indigenous communities have been utilizing for centuries. We can marry that with modern technology, and together we can all be a part of the future of food. That is what we can do.
Well, I think that is a great note to end on. Thank you. I know some of us earlier in a break were plotting a global development film festival at some point, so maybe we need to talk about so everyone can see your films. But thank you all so much for your time today.
Thank you, Kate.
Thank you.
Thanks.